Right. So I welcome you all to this February session of Inspire, a book review club that brings for you non-fiction books, authors, and dignitaries who practice mostly the books they read and they implement them so well. So today we have two books being reviewed, one being done by me and another by our Sridhar sir, who is a great mentor. So welcome, Sridhar sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And so as I am the founder, member of this club, I don't really think I have to introduce myself. Let's straight away start the review. I'm a bit nervous. I never thought I'll be nervous on Inspire platform, but yes, I am today. Is the slideshow visible?
Yes.
Yes. So as the book says, Nehru's 97 major blunders. It's a one-sided title, isn't it? It has already put somebody in a, in a criminal rope. So before I start enumerating, before I start really elaborating on the blunders that he created, there are lots of disclaimers that are to be put forth so that we do not judge him. We are in no position to judge him. Rather, we just are here to understand or go or study deeper, take the subject deeper. Well, I'm not a historian. I'm not a politician. I'm not any of them. I'm just a curious citizen of this country. I just wanted to know as to what happened when India was born. In my thirst to do so, I first read my Experiments with Truth. But then my Experiments with Truth, the autobiography of Mahatma Gandhi, stops way before Indian independence. So then I was, not able to reach there where I wanted to reach. So I started looking for other books. As you remember, most of you had attended. I had reviewed a book called The Best PM India Never Had. I had reviewed this last year. Then I had ordered this book, the one I'm reviewing today along with it. The author, Mr. Rajnikant Purnik, he studied in IIT Kharagpur and then Kanpur. He is himself a scholar. He has authored technical and non-fiction books. And these are some of the books that he has really gone deep into the subject, done a lot of research on it. And when I'm reading this book, they are not mere opinions, but they are facts, they are excerpts from some interviews, they are references with code numbers, sharing as to where this fact has come from. So a very strong research that he has done on both the topics. Is the next slide visible or is it still on the first slide? Is Mr. Purnik's photograph visible? No. Sometimes a problem. Okay. Now is it visible? Thank you. So this is the author. So let us take first our list of disclaimers and then, of course, the book ahead. And Nehru was the first Prime Minister of independent India. So, and before that, if we look at the history, we were under Mughal rule for generations and then 150 years of British Raj. So there was absolutely no legacy of ruling a nation of this size. There was no training done. There was nothing of the sort that was done. So everything being done was being done for the first time. That is something that is to be considered when we elaborate the blunders. Secondly, somebody who holds office for 15 years is ought to make mistakes. And surely he might have had his goods or bads. There are many gifts that Nehru has given this nation, IIMs, IITs, ISRO, so many of them which are today at a place where they are because of his progressive nature. So definitely, we are not going to judge him. We are just here to explore the truth. Starting with the list of blunders Author says 97, but sincerely, they are sometimes split. I mean, the same blunder is split into parts in order to stress on certain points or so. Am I absolutely clear and audible? Am I? Yeah, thank you. So let's start with the first blunder, which is the presidential election of Congress Working Committee 1946. Well, why was this presidential election so important? Because this president being that was going to be chosen would have become the first prime minister of independent India. Because by this time, India knew that we are going to get independence in an year and a half. So this election was very, very, very important. This was to happen in April, somewhere around 29th April. So Mahatma Gandhi, who was really not a member of Congress Working Committee, he had resigned in 1936, had expressed his opinion that he wanted Nehru to become the first Prime Minister of independent India. And he expressed this 9 days before actually the elections. And still, what happened in the elections? There were 15 members of the Pradesh Congress Committee who were to nominate the president and cast their votes. There were 15 members, out of which 12 nominated Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, and 3 did not nominate anyone. So 80% majority said that Sardar Patel should become the prime minister. But then Gandhiji had his conviction. He wanted to see Nehru in that place. So he asked somebody, and somebody said somebody else. And so somebody said that, some people wanted Nehru to become the president. Immediately after listening to that, Sardar Patel looked at Gandhiji and asked, Bapu, kya karu? And Bapu asked him to take back his name. This is how this election was sabotaged. This is how it was an dictatorial election. It was an undemocratic election which gave us our first prime minister. Well, you will ask me as to what was the blunder that was created by Nehru. He was not there in the picture, but somebody has a dignity, He could have rejected this. He could have straight away said that this is not how it is done. But then he had his own ambitions, and those ambitions could not let him do that. So this was the first blunder, directly of Mahatma Gandhi and indirectly of Nehru. Second in the list, well, for understanding this blunder, we have to go a little back to 1945 when World War II had just finished. It had really exhausted Britain. And in that situation, there were appraisals in India. Indian National Army soldiers were being tried, because of which Indian Army and Indian Navy men were already revolting against their British superiors. There were 3 lakh mill workers and dockers who were on strike, and British government was not in a condition to handle all of this. And this is the reason why Prime Minister Attlee said that if India elects to be independent, she has right to do so. And as a result, he sent cabinet mission plan to India in 1946. Well, we'll not go into the details of cabinet mission plan. We have already discussed in the previous review. But one thing that I would be telling you here is that this plan, which was being discussed in March and was being amended and taken till May, had clearly stated that Muslim League's demand for a separate nation will not be accepted. So Pakistan was not to be accepted as a separate nation till May. And Jinnah had also somewhere come to a point that maybe later we can think of Pakistan. But then by the end of July, Nehru delivered a speech. And in that speech, he said that Congress is absolutely unfettered by agreement and is free to handle situations as they come. This speech gave Jinnah an excuse to just go against and disagree with his previous agreement of the plan. And he said that he instigated Muslim League leaders or people to go for a riot, go for a communal riot, and that was called as Direct Action Day, or the Calcutta killing as we call it. 10,000 people died, 15,000 were injured, and more than 1 lakh were homeless. So one insensible speech, and it led to this, and then Pakistan as a separate nation. So this is next in the list of blunders. This is how, and in fact, a lot happened when Jinnah was offered becoming prime minister and whatnot, but not really our agenda today. Next in the list is mismanaged partition. Well, to understand this again, let's go back a bit. In 1942, this was in fact a part of our history books. If nothing else was there, this was there, that for 36 months, all our great leaders were in jail, isn't it? 1942 to 45, all our great leaders were put in jail. But this book really elaborates their schedule in the jail, how luxurious life they were leading. And above that, what is our concern is that there was no detailed plan that was being laid forward to see how an independent nation will be like. There were no policy discussions happening in those 36 months as to how will we set up partition, is there going to be any need of anything else, or how will the ministries or partition or demarcations of states will be, and so on and so forth. So why was this so? Because actually these leaders did not expect independence so soon. Independence did not happen because of non-violence. Independence happened because of the bottleneck situation that we just now discussed. And so we can say that India-Pakistan partition was indeed a mismanaged one. They were busy finalizing portfolios, distributing assets to the two nations, but they were not paying any heed to the 14 million Hindus, Sikhs, and Muslims that were left homeless and who were migrating from one nation to the other. 1 to 3 million were slaughtered, but there is no real number that can be shared about this. Mountbatten made sure that British troops left India before partition activity started. Think of it. They exploited us for 150 years, but they did not have grace to stay back and protect us when we needed them the most. Isn't it? Apart from that, Mountbatten himself was the commander-in-chief at that time, as there was a 1-year hand-holding commitment from the British. And also in one of the speeches, there's a reference that he said that I'll make sure that there is no bloodshed during partition. And what happened, we all know. Well, what could have been done? There could have been one, that British army could have been stopped or could have been asked to stay back. Number two, there would have been a planned partition in phases. And number three, we already had Indian National Army at our disposal. Could we not use their trained soldiers to help us out with securing people who were migrating? So there were so many other ways of handling partition, but definitely not leaving them to the mercy of the others. Next is the formation of POK. Well, Pakistan raiders with the support of Pakistani army were invading Jammu and Kashmir in October 47. So Sardar Patel had started setting up divisional headquarters of army and also building roads to carry army equipments and trucks in Jammu Pathankot highway. And Indian army was being airlifted to Leh to push back Indian invaders. When so much was happening, in December 1948, Major General Thimayya had asked Nehru to give him 2 weeks. He said, if you give me 2 weeks, I'll absolutely push off all the invaders from Kashmir border. But Nehru was so really rigid, and in fact, I would say blindfolded by Mountbatten, who had committed that this will be sorted out in UN, that he declared ceasefire at the midnight of 31st December 1948. And so Indian army was asked to stop taking any action. And that is why we are gifted with POK today. Nobody could sort it out for 75 next years. Well, and 35% of the total land share is POK. Total land share of India, of Kashmir POK occupies 35%. Before understanding let's take the accession part. There was a Ministry of State that was set up, which I had shared in my previous review, and around 549 princely states were incorporated, were made part of India, one after the other by Sardar Patel. But Nehru made sure that Kashmir was kept out of this docket of Sardar Patel, this Ministry of States. Nehru started handling it himself. What was the reason? The reason was very simple. Sheikh Abdullah, who was his best friend, his blood brother, was to be secured. Everybody else knew that he was a nuisance, but for Nehru, he was the near and dear one. Well, Maharaja Hari Singh of Kashmir was ready to become a part of India without conditions. He was ready to sign the agreement without conditions, but Nehru refused. He said that Sheikh Abdullah, who was imprisoned at that time, should be freed, and he made the first Prime Minister of independent Jammu and Kashmir. This was not acceptable, and that is the reason it was accession. It was a matter taken to UN and whatnot, and eventually Nehru made sure that Sheikh Abdullah became the first Prime Minister, though he was dismissed as a PM by 1953 and was put to jail for 11 years for Kashmir conspiracy case. So that was the man Nehru was backing. And he was also the one who gifted us with Article 370 and 35A, which we know so well. Next in the list is taking Kashmir to UN. Well, why was this a blunderous act? Number one, Nehru thought that Kashmir was a place of justice, but in reality, it was just a superpower gameplay. Five superpowers were deciding as to how things can be brought in their favor and how they can amend their convenient ways out. And secondly, by taking Kashmir to UN, he had allowed the consideration of Pakistan's angle to be taken up. So now here, let us try and understand what was the UK angle of Kashmir. Well, UK and the West wanted to restrict Russia and China's expansion towards Indian Ocean. And they knew that Kashmir was at a strategic location. If it had become part of India, Indian politicians would not have supported them the way Pakistani politicians would have done, or Kashmir as an independent state would have been. So they had strategically brought Kashmir into dispute and then to UN. And Mountbatten was the implementer of this strategy in India, which Nehru could never see. Nehru could never see that Mountbatten was making him take Junagadh to UN, Hyderabad to UN, and whatnot. But thankfully, Hyderabad and Junagadh were handled by Sardar Patel, but he could not take over Kashmir because of Nehru. The next in the list of blunders is allowing Tibet to be part of China and getting erased as an independent nation. Well, here we need to know that in 8th century, Tibet and China had a treaty where it was decided that both the countries are going to respect each other's border. And there are stones engraved with these facts on the Tibet side as well as on China side. But then in 1950, Chinese army started getting aggressive towards Tibet. Tibet raised a voice in UN, but it was not a member of UN, so UN did not recognize it. So it came to India. It asked for help, but Nehru said that India neither has resources nor inclination to help Tibet. These were the words. Now, try and understand why we wanted to help, why we should have helped Tibet even if we had less resources. For two specific reasons. One, Tibet was a peaceful neighbor and a spiritual companion for India, number one. Number two, Tibet was a buffer between India and China. Till 1947, there was no border that was common between India and China. There was only one border, which was Indo-Tibet border. But after 1950, it became India-China border because China took over Tibet. Sardar Patel had apprehended this way before his death in 1950, but he just could not convey that to Nehru or make Nehru understand the gravity of it. Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai could just not come over Nehru till 1962. Well, here there's a very interesting quick story that is shared, that immediately after the news of China's entry into Tibet, when this news came out on radio, Commander General W.D.A. Lenting, who was delivering a lecture to the Defense Service staff at Wellington, India, shared that India's back door has been opened. And he said that some of you might fight China before your retirement. So in 1950, people could actually anticipate that there is going to be an Indo-China war. Everyone could understand across globe except Nehru. In fact, British rulers had carried out special operations when they were ruling India to protect Tibet's status and thereby protect India. So this was a real blunder that we can say led to the stepping stone of Indo-China war. Advocating UNSC membership for China and sacrificing our own. In 1950, the 5 permanent members of UN were US, UK, USSR, France, and Taiwan. US wanted to take up India as the 6th member and had proposed India's name, but Nehru rejected. He wanted the seat to be given to China, stating that it would be unfair for a great country like China not to be part of a Security Council. And rest is a history. Till date, we are struggling to become a permanent member of UNSC. Thanks to China, every time there's a proposal, China is the one who uses its veto power against India, and we cannot get it. Veto power is something where even if one nation says no, then there is a no. There is no majority. So this was again a real blunder which could have been avoided. When there was a chance, we could have really taken it well. Next are the boundary disputes with China. Well, at the time of independence, India, as I shared, had no direct boundary with China. But British left India with a bad legacy of unclear and disputed lands. So wherever you see the maps, the borders were marked as dotted lines or hidden lines because they were unclear borders. Aksai Chin and McMahon line, these are, here you can see Aksai Chin and also McMahon line marked there in red, hidden line. So these were the 2 lines of real problem between India and China. And instead of sitting with China, sorting it out, working out some way to find a solution, Nehru did exact reverse of it. In 1954, Nehru, sitting in his office, drew a firm line which were already dotted and wanted his office to just publish this map as the map for India, the border between India and China. And this led to the starting point of Indo-China war. When McMahon line was a border between India and Tibet, which was drawn with an agreement in 1914. But later, when Tibet was taken over by China, it had no validity. And way back in 1914 also, when McMahon line was drawn, China had not signed the agreement. China had disagreed with the drawing of that line because China did not think that Tibet deserved an independent status. So Nehru used his maximalist position that was drawn by British in defining this northeast border and declared the demarcation without any discussion or agreement with China. Well, if we look at China, they have settled borders with Burma, Nepal, and Pakistan. So definitely it is not their attitude to have this kind of a headache, right? They always had initiated a talk, an intention to have a talk or a swap or whatever to sort out these border issues. But then what had to happen had to happen. So India-China war is also called as the Himalayan blunder, and it started way back in 1960. The seeds were sown way back in 1960. Chinese delegation had come to propose a swap of McMahon Line and Aksai Chin, but uh, Nehru totally rejected the plan, and in fact, he went ahead with a forward policy, putting up posts at along the border that he had identified sitting back in his office. And then what started was Indo-China War in 1942. Well, it is not publicly told, but the reality is that immediately after 4 days of the war, China offered ceasefire, and China had suggested that there can be a discussion and we can sort this matter out with discussions. But Nehru rejected, and then India had a real setback in the war. And after a month, again, China went. China proposed a ceasefire and some talk, but this time Nehru accepted the ceasefire, but not the talk. Think of it, if the right agreements, documentation, and other needed things were worked out right at that time, when China was in a difficult state, was in a complete mindset to settle the issues, we would not have paid so heavily for it now. But then today, when China has become really powerful, even their intention to sort it out has faded down the street. Well, moving ahead to the last segment of my review, that is the Indus Water Treaty. Well, Himalayan blunders, there are 3 Himalayan blunders that are said to be the biggest blunders in the portfolio of Nehru. One was what was accepting the erasure of Tibet as a nation. Second was Indo-China War, and the third one was Indus Water Treaty. Well, in 1960, a treaty was signed between India and Pakistan, where India generously committed 80.5% water of the Indus system to Pakistan. Well, what does this mean? This means that Jhelum, Chenab, and Indus mainstream are totally reserved for Pakistan, and India cannot draw water from it. Well, this was too generous. In fact, India could have asked for the POK against this, or India could have restricted this to a time frame so that India's extended needs could have been catered in a later date. But none of them that was done. And today, Jammu and Kashmir and Punjab are heavily paying for this with the scarcity of water. So this was a crisp list of some of the blunders from this book, which I thought were worth sharing, and in fact, which I thought that were never shared with us in our curriculum books or through any other sources. So that is all from my side. We can have discussions on this topic ahead after the review by Sridhar sir. So thank you for your patience. I know it was a history class for possibly 30 minutes, but then I think things that are not told to us or hidden from us are important, and they were to be shared like this. So thank you. Well, taking the session ahead, I am really delighted to introduce Sridhar sir. We were fortunate to host him for a session, I think 4.5 years back to Nagpur. Well, Sridhar sir is a personal energy coach. He is former senior editor of Times of India Group. He is a journalist, mentor, and a faculty for schools and colleges and many postgraduate courses. He is on a mission to create 1 million energy genies, as he calls them. And so he runs a firm called Energies Academy. I hope I have pronounced it rightly, sir. And apart from this, he pursues singing, cartooning, digital art, and loves thinking out of box. If you follow him on Facebook, you will see his out of box thinking really regularly and delightfully. So, really happy to host you, sir. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Am I audible clearly?
Yes. Yes.
Very nice. Okay. Thank you for the lovely introduction. It's a pleasure to be inspired by Inspire. And congratulations for 7 years of sustained readership fostering, I can call it, in this age of mobile phones, to be continuously, keeping the book habit alive is no jokes. So I congratulate all of you. And yeah, and thank you for the review of that book. It's very interesting, and we will talk about it, I guess, after the session, right? So I have, when Sheetal asked me 2 weeks back, what book would you like to read? I had just come across this book called Masala Lab. I'll just take 2 minutes why this book came to me. So I have been collecting books on energy management and stuff like this for many years. So the habit is that I see a book and intuitively it says yes, and I pick it up. I may not read it at that point. I may read it 10 years later, but I just pick it up. So this book also kind of answered some questions for me when I read its excerpt, because I had just taken to cooking, okay, in the lockdown, and basic stuff, okay. But when you see cooking from an energy point of view, from what happens when you cook, right? That answer no book was giving me. So for instance, if you have a chai banate ho, and you put the chini or the powder inside that, and what happens in that water when it starts to boil, right? So aap full blast mein wo gas chalate ho, to something else happens. If you put it on the sim, you put something else happens. Ye jo hai na, this kind of micro assessment, and so many things are happening. So that used to fascinate me. So my mother, she's a damn good cook. She's 90 years old, and that generation who are born cooks in a manner of speaking, right? Like sambar, smell se pata chalta hai ki, whether the sambar is going to be good or not, or the way an idli atta is fugoing, or it's blowing up, coming up, usse pata chalta hai whether it's going to be consistent or the taste is good. That kind of insight. So I used to see that there is a lot of science here. I mean, these women who are, you women, I will say, all of you all who know cooking so well, they're like chemical scientists. Yeah, I mean, they'll know the stuff, and there's so much of intuition, which is my space, and I work in that space. So this book, and if you go to see book reviews, books on cooking, invariably, whether the Tarla Dalals of the world or Sanjeev Kapoors of the world, okay, you will get typical 100 soups you can make, 100 biryanis you can make. Ye ingredient hai, ye process hai, ye serve for two. Very typical language, very typical way of pronouncing. They don't go beyond that. And I used to look for something that goes at the backstage as to what happens in cooking. And that's when I landed across this book. This is a book, okay. And I must say it's very, very interesting because it's written by a software engineer. So Krish Ashok, I believe he has a big following on Instagram where he teaches music also. Okay. So he's a software engineer and he's a cook. He's not a chef, but he's a cook. And he has very good insights on cooking. And he applies algorithms and formulas, and he approaches cooking from a completely different point of view. And that's very refreshing. So that's what made me pick this book up. And I feel that every person who, and I don't know this man, okay, and I'm promoting him, but but I feel everybody who loves cooking, be it a beginner or an expert cook, should read this book, because you get to see certain insights about molecules, about so many things. Say for instance, you buy rice from the grocer, okay, आपने लिख दिया राइस 2 किलो या 5 किलो, okay, तो month first month में जो rice आता है and आप cook करते हो, that is one consistency. But the next month the consistency changes and you say, hey, I think he sent a different rice. जो last month भेजा था ना, वो नहीं भेजा. You know, so why does that happen? I've always wondered, why does it happen? Every rice looks the same, and there is the explanation in this book. Okay, so it covers a lot of insights, and many of them are heavy भी है मेरे लिए, and obviously because I'm not so deep into cooking. How about you all? I mean, let me just get a gauge of my audience. And it's a typical journalistic trait, you know. We need to know what's the deadline, that is half an hour. What's the brief, which is about this book. And I need to know my audience. So if you can, there are not many of us, but if you can come with your videos on, it'll be nice to just see expressions. Can you come with your videos on? Yeah, and can you tell me? Yeah, thank you. So let's, Sheetal, if this becomes a kind of an interaction, is okay? Is there a format that I have to follow?
Perfectly fine. No format at all.
Okay. So can you tell me your experience of cooking? I mean, how many of you all are expert cooks? Just a raise of hand. Only 4 or 5 people have shown me the videos, but
I'm not an expert, but I love cooking.
Okay.
I enjoy cooking, and I love it like a havan that we do, like a puja that we do.
Okay. How many of you all cook? Yes, please.
I'm an expert eater, I would say. I have not yet started and ventured into cooking, but that is also a very equally important part. If you don't have an expert eater, then there is no point cooking, you know.
Okay. True.
So yeah, later I have a few interesting things to share, particularly in this area.
Okay, sure. So when you all cook, just want your understanding. When you all cook, do you all cook कि इतना ये डालना है, इतना ये डालना है, इतना ये डालना है, and इतना डालना है, and बन जाता है. चलो काम हो गया. Half an hour का इसका cooking time. Do you all approach cooking? How do you all approach cooking? You know, that's my basic question. Do you go beyond the mere recipes or backstage जाते हो? कैसे होता है? Do you understand that? Do you understand from? I just want to know. You know. Do you intuitively work or do you work according to set guidelines?
I'm really if I at all venture into cooking, my learning of cooking will start from there after the recipe ends, you know.
After the recipe ends, yeah. Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Smita ji, you're on mute.
For me, it's the smile on my kids' faces. Like I have 2 sons. As Bengalis, they are really foodie, and I learned all sorts of traditional Bengali sweet making from my mother-in-law, just because of my son wanted to have, and we had sweets like my mother-in-law used to make wonderful shondesh. I learned it because my son used to say it is Thammu shondesh. Thammu is grandmother. So
my question is your cooking intuitive or is it processed?
Both. It's emotional. Okay. It's more of an emotion than the intuition or the science.
Interesting, isn't it? So the reason why I asked you this question is because
actually it is according to taste too. You know, sometimes we feel like having less chili. It depends on the family members, how which kind of food you like to have. Spicy or
the size of the faces of the loved ones.
Let me ask you a question. Now, I'm no expert in this. Okay, I have read this book a little bit, and that's why I'm telling you. When you all make chana masala, okay, how many of you all put baking soda?
I do.
Never ever. There is no need to add baking powder. No need at all.
Baking soda.
Baking soda.
It softens the chana.
It's interesting because I asked my wife this question and she says, I put, but Amma does not put. Okay, so I realized, different people got different mechanisms. Okay, those who put baking soda, how many of those people put a tea bag in the pressure cooker?
No, I don't.
I put amla instead of tea bag.
Achha. Do you know the reason? You're on mute. Anita Arora, yeah. Yeah, sorry. Are you there?
So is it to bring color into it?
No,
Yeah.
apparently, according to this author, so the baking soda does not completely mix nahi hota. Okay, so some part of it enters your stomach and it generates carbon dioxide, and that causes the distension, the gas that post chana masala that we get. So he says that the tea bag absorbs that extra bit of baking soda, and you don't get distension. So, you know, and he offers a very interesting insight into these kind of things. Okay, let me ask you one more question. How many of you all, what is the ratio of when you cook rice? Okay, तो पानी कितना डालते हो? कितना होना चाहिए पानी? When you are begoing the rice.
Double the rice.
Okay, so he says that grandmother recipe of thing is 2 fingers above the rice level. The water should be 2 fingers above the rice level. You know what I mean?
Actually,
I'm just
perfect.
pointing you
Actually,
out.
perfect.
It's perfect. He's saying that's the grandmother recipe. So you make itna sa rice, you make itna rice. Your formula is the same. So he says that when you approach things from a scientific point of view, then everything starts to make different kind of sense. So be it pressure cooker, why should the pressure cooker come into existence in the first stage? Like if you cook in an open vessel, it takes much more longer than in a pressure cooker. Why? You know, we are so used to cooker mein dalo, cook karo, but it goes beyond that. There has to be a pressure. That pressure is not there in an open vessel. That's why it cooks at say 100 degrees, and a pressure cooker cooks at 120 degrees. So small things. So it's interesting to know. So yeah, I won't give you the whole book, obviously. Yeah, you can read it, but I'll give you a gist of what I understood from it. Yeah. And should I share screen? Do I have the permission for that? Okay. How do you get to full screen? Yeah, this. Can you see the screen? Yeah, okay. So I'll just continue like this. So yeah, this is Krish Ashok, a South Indian, yeah, and Masala Lab, published by Penguin. So he talks about it as the science of Indian cooking, and he's taken an engineering approach to understand cooking. Okay. The aim of this book, one second, let me just minimize this. Yeah. So the aim of the book is not to make you a chef. It will just make you a better home cook. And even if it doesn't do that, it will at the very least make you curious about how delicious food is made and make you fall in love with the craft of cooking, which is beautiful, you know. Like she said that it's an emotion for her. I'm sure that's the case with many people who are into cooking. That you tend to love the way that dish turns out, and it's always mysterious. Banega kaisa, you know, especially if it's a new dish. And sometimes the same dish should be the same taste. Like I stay in Mumbai, and there are these places in Dadar. There is this place called Sri Krishna Vada Pav. Okay, Batata Vada. I don't know how many of you have tasted that. Now, when I was a child, I used to go there, and that shop was there. And the Batata Vada that used to be selling at that point tastes the same as today. Now, I always wonder, it's a little salty, slightly little salty. How do they get that slight salt in every vada that they make? How do they ensure that? And that's the reason why these patrons come, right? There's a heavy pressure on that guy to ensure that the vada comes straight the same way. So I used to always wonder, I should interview this fellow, ask, you know, obviously he's not going to tell me, but what is the recipe? And that's the secret to most restaurants' success, right? So if you were to do it in your house, how do you ensure that the chai that you make is exactly the same taste as you want it and as everybody is expecting of you? Kabhi zyada chini, kabhi kam chini nahi hona chahiye. How do you get that? So this book at least gives you an insight as to many of the therapies, not such therapies, sorry, many of the techniques that you can use in cooking, and it may just make you go, wow, yeah, this is interesting, you know. So that is the whole aim of this book, as far as I understand it. At least it made me do that. Okay, one sec. what were the highlights as I found it? Content is very, very good. It's very, there's no wastage of words, you know. Yesterday I was reading a book on some self-help kind of thing, and there's so much of gyanbazi, so much. So you can really skip the book, and in a chapter you can read in 5 minutes because you know, you can just skip. But here I could not skip it. I had to really read every line, go back that para, and come, you know, churn it in my mind. And that's really value for money, because that man has really put in a lot of effort. You know, he's not bragged about himself, nothing. He's purely stuck to the science and explained the whole thing. So I quite like that. And very humorous writing. Normally such writing, when you explain science, it can get boring, right? I mean, someone who's not a science background, it's just too much to understand molecules and all. But if he makes it very, very laughable, very humorous, you know. So instead of saying, for instance, the hydrogen atoms get what is that line? They connect with other oxygen atoms and blah blah. Okay, so you'll say they have this thing going on between themselves, this orgy, Roman orgy between. I mean, he uses words in such a way that it makes it light to read, and you get to understand what he's trying to say, and that really helped, because otherwise this kind of book, this kind of approach to a subject can make it very, very heavy. I mean, we see it in textbooks of our kids, right? So blandly written that the kids are bored. I hope this man could have explained science in this way to our children. You know? So, yeah. So very detailed explanations, scientific explanations that even a newcomer would understand. Yeah, because you need to. It's not necessary to remember, but it's good to know the process that happens. Just for your understanding. And also the content has hand-drawn images that further explain his point. His elder brother has done the images. Very rudimentary, but it breaks the monotony of the text, the grey text. It's not a color book. You see, that's also something I liked. Otherwise, most cookery books full of colorful photographs and this and that. This is like a proper novel, a non-fiction book. There is no color. Okay, it's like black and white drawings, and there is a sense to that as well. Perfect book for beginners and expert cooks. I think he's managed to touch both the parties. I'm a beginner and I could read it. I showed it to my wife. She didn't read it, but she was like, really, oh, aisa hai kya? So there was a lot of value there, you know, HMMM, which makes anything interesting, right? Some takeaway lines that I could just pick up. Cooking is essentially chemical engineering in a home laboratory called a kitchen, with an optional lab coat known as an apron. Okay, or a sari ka pallu. That is the more optional lab coat. Understanding basic food science will make you a significantly better cook, and also unlock your ability to experiment boldly without being tethered to recipes. This is what I meant at that point, that we are so recipe-led in cooking. Food is ultimately just chemicals. He says the process of turning a chickpea pod into chana masala is engineering. Which is true, right? You're putting so many things, adding heat. फिर water क्या करता है? फिर pressure cooker के अंदर क्या होता है? Everything is physics, na? Physics, chemistry at play there. And if you understand that process, it makes cooking more interesting. It's high time we take an engineering approach to cooking in addition to the tradition, history, and art approach. So the grandma wisdom plus the software engineer's knowledge plus the home cook's experience, everything put together makes for a better cooking experience. This is what he's aimed at, and I think it works. So some chapters, okay, it's divided into 8 chapters with a lot of topics within each chapter. So the first one is about pressure cooking. So he talks about how understanding the basic physics of heat and chemistry of water are essential to becoming a better cook. Pressure cooker mein wahi to hota hai, right? The author gives scientific insights into pressure cooker cooking and teaches how you can get it right every time while saving on energy. So let me see if I can read a portion from that first chapter. Okay, one second. So, okay. So he's talking of the boiling point of water. Okay. So I'm just reading it out from. This happens at 100 degrees centigrade when you are at sea level. If the water boils away, your food will burn. So one has no choice but to keep the cooking temperature under 100 degrees. This is why cooking rice or lentils in an open vessel seem to take forever. Here is where air pressure comes into the picture. If you try and cook rice in an open vessel in Shimla, you will be somewhat frustrated because water boils at 92 degrees centigrade there. The air pressure in Shimla, which is 7,500 feet above sea level, is lower than that it is than in Chennai. You can intuitively visualize this. Air pressure is literally the amount of force that the air around you is exerting on you. If you are liquid water that is being heated up, the more the pressure, the harder it is for the individual molecules to break apart and float away as vapor. Dennis Papin realized that if he could find a way to artificially increase the air pressure inside a vessel, he could raise the boiling point of water and thus reduce cooking time. Thus, the pressure cooker was born. Okay, very interesting insight, right? I mean, what made these guys devise these things? So that's the chapter 1, and if I were to give you a gist of what he has covered in that, here. So basic physics of cooking, basic chemistry of cooking, the magic of water, understanding just water, the science of rice, the science of lentils, the science of wheat, science of vegetables, science of meat, science of eggs, science of fat. These are the things that are covered in this chapter. Everything is science, okay, and written in a layman language. Okay. Let's go to the next chapter. The next chapter is science of spice and flavor. So he offers a simple, intuitive way to understand where flavor comes from. How to extract the right amount from your spices and how to combine flavors in the most and the best possible way. He teaches how to make fresh spice mixes and not store them for weeks. He says, "Aap ghar mein spice bana ke rakhte ho, after a few days or maybe a week, its value is zero." He's saying it's much better to make instant spice, use it instantly and khatam karo usko. So he says you can make it at home, and he's given the ways in which you can do that. And very interestingly, and some of the stuff is, you know, science of salt in this chapter, and science of sugar, science of heat, origins of flavor, extracting flavor, combining flavors. So this is what this chapter is dealing with. And if I have to go there, one sec. So for instance, he's talking of, consider coriander. Its name comes from chorus, the Greek word for bed bugs. Interesting, isn't it? Because the ancient Greeks thought that the seeds smelled like the insect. This is just, you know, trivia stuff. And then he goes about how to understand spice and how to combine spice and create new recipes. This is chapter 2. Chapter 3 is, where are we? Yeah. Brown, gravy, brown. Now, this chapter focuses on cooking's most famous reaction, the Maillard reaction. Maillard reaction, how many of you know what is the Maillard reaction? आप जब onion को sort करते हो, उसको brown बनाते हो, that reaction is the browning of any vegetable, okay, on the tawa is called Maillard reaction. So he describes this in the context of onion and garlic. He touches up on how to cook them and extract even more flavor and the right way to deep fry. So he's saying how much to cook. बहुत ज़्यादा कर लिया तो then the flavor goes away. बहुत कम कर लिया तो the flavor does not come. So how do you ensure that you are in the you hit the sweet spot? Okay. So I won't read out from every chapter, but I've just marked out some bits that I thought would be interesting for you. One sec. like I was talking about the rice thing when we buy it from the grocer. Okay, I don't know how many of you know this. I at least didn't know. White rice, like most starchy foods, has two kinds of starch molecules: amylose and amylopectin. Okay? It's the combination of these two that decides whether your rice is going to be cooked well, it's going to be sticky, or is it going to be loose. Okay, for instance, rice varieties with less than 20% amylose, that means 80% amylopectin, tend to become a little sticky after cooking, while varieties with more than 20% amylose tend to have separate grains. He gives examples. Basmati rice is aromatic and tends to contain between 20 to 25% amylose, which makes it suitable for pulao because they don't stick, the grains don't stick. And pulao and biryani, okay? Onni rice from South India has 16% amylose, which makes it stickier than the rest. Gobindo Bhog rice from Bengal is aromatic and has about 18% amylose. Sona Masuri rice has 23% amylose, is non-aromatic. How do you, so I was Googling, how do you find out the amylose content of a rice? How do you do that, right? So it's a very technical process. You have to add something. So then I realized that maybe in the packing itself, I don't know, in Big Basket, they would give it in packing, and maybe in the packing it would be mentioned what is the amylose level, what is the percentage. Next time, I want to watch that, because the grocer gives it in just a plastic packet, right? But in these malls, you get it in proper packed versions. So I don't know, maybe you guys can also check it out at your level. It's interesting that we get to know what is the amylose content and therefore predict how the rice is going to be when it's cooked. Okay, and not blame ourselves कि हमको cooking नहीं आता है या हमने सीटी जो है 2-3 सीटी के बाद उसको बंद कर दिया या whatever. We always tend to blame ourselves कि we didn't do it properly. But maybe the rice is not meant to be cooked that. Yeah, so that's what I realized. So this chapter, the chapter 3 is about the browning of the Maillard reaction, and obviously in our cooking this reaction is very common, and we do a lot of stuff with this process, right? So yeah. Chapter 4, dropping acid. This chapter introduces you to acids and sourness, okay, and how to temper them to get the best dish. So it talks about the science of yogurt and tamarind and mango and citrus juices and vinegar and tomatoes, other culinary acids, how you can add an acid to reduce or neutralize some other effect. That day, I think when I was cooking, my mother was saying I put a little too much salt, and my mother told me to add something else, I forget that, to neutralize that. And it's fascinating to think of, so many ways in which you can manage a situation. So this chapter is about acids, yeah. And I will go to my next, let me see what I have here. Yeah, so here's that bit about that 2 fingers about the rice. So here is where your grandmother's till the first knuckle of your index finger rule is good science. Even celebrity chefs on TV who make it seem like the 1:2 ratio is linearly scalable get this wrong. If you are using a narrow vertical walled vessel and not a wide vessel where the evaporation rate is higher, the general rule is to add water till it is as high as 1 knuckle of your index finger above the rice level. For small amounts of rice, it just fortuitously turns out that a ratio between 1 to 1.5 or 1:2 works out to be the close to the first knuckle rule. Okay, and he goes on to give some details as to this formula will always work for you. So yeah, this is chapter 4. So dropping acid and how to understand the role of acid in your cooking. Umami, chapter 5, umami, soda, and rum. He says MSG, okay, the chapter talks about ingredients that don't have a good reputation, like MSG and sodium bicarbonate. MSG was made infamous when the Maggie episode happened, right, a couple of years back. So monosodium glutamate, right, that's the full form. But he says that you can use it in a particular way and it will not be harmful. Okay, and he explains that in this chapter. He also introduces you to the idea of using alcohol when cooking, a practice very common in the West. I don't know how many people in India use alcohol while cooking, but he shows ways in which you can do that. Vodka and entire list hai yahan pe. So, for instance, the Japanese combine kombu and bonito flakes. So he gives examples from Italians combine Parmesan cheese and tomatoes. Middle Eastern cuisines they use it like this. So he also talks the magic of baking soda, sodium bicarbonate. So if you are using all this, then it really makes sense that you check this out, and maybe you'll have a different way of cooking the same dish. The magic of alcohol. So I'm just reading from his. So for instance, let me read this out to you. A splash of vodka, brandy, or rum when cooking onions, ginger, garlic, tomatoes, and spice powders has two benefits. Extraction of more flavor from the spices and the alcohol's ability to release all those sticky bits from the bottom of the pan, which have a ton of flavor thanks to the Maillard reaction. I didn't know all this. So if you are using alcohol in the house, आपके family में tradition है, so maybe you can try this. Next, taking it to the next level. In this chapter, he touched upon newer cooking techniques like the microwave, how to get the best out of it. Beyond mere reheating. Most microwaves we just use it to reheat. So he tells you how it works and what can you do and how you should not do certain things in the microwave. He also talks about the instant pot. Modern ingredients like sodium citrate, xanthan gum, and liquid smoke. Honestly, I didn't read this, but it looks interesting. But he also mentioned about this hot plate, and what you're not supposed to do in that, and how it works scientifically, how it works, and how it is different from your stove, from your gas burner, and therefore how you should not cook certain things on the gas, on the hot plate, and. Yeah, so this is this chapter, which is interesting, right? I mean, today I think I don't know how many of you all use the instant pot, but I was checking it out on YouTube. Very, very useful, I must say. It's a little pricey, but I think everything can be cooked inside that same pot. I have not experienced it. Maybe you can share during the question answer session. Chapter 7, burn the recipe. In this chapter, he introduces you to the concept of a meta model for the common styles of Indian dishes. So he says you create a model which you can use for many Indian dishes. If you just know the formula, as I told you earlier. He talks about repeatable and scalable algorithms for dishes that use regional ingredients. So same type of ingredients है तो एक type का एक formula based cooking हुआ तो that becomes better for you. Suggests a common set of modular cooking techniques to help you make any gravy. I guess this is very time consuming, time saving as well. If you know the quick fix ways of cooking. I'm sure you all must be knowing, but he has offered some explanations there. How much time do I have? 5. Have I exceeded my time, Sheetal?
Maybe five minutes more.
Okay, fine. I've come to the end anyways. So the biryani, this is the last chapter. He's devoted complete to what he calls the delectable juxtaposition of the subcontinent staple grain, which is rice, with meat and spices. So he teaches us how to cook the perfect biryani, the different types of biryani, and how you can get it spot on. Okay, I have not cooked biryani, so for me, I could not gain much from this passage, but I'm sure you all would be able to. And yeah, so since I have 5 minutes, I won't dwell much. This is the details. It's costing $3.99, available on Amazon. Publishers Penguin. There's an ebook as well. Page is 259, and my rating was 5. Looking forward to your ratings. Thank you.
Lovely. An interesting book made even more interesting.
Thank you.
With your special tadka.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Yes, indeed. Love the way he has gone into the underlying meaning of the processes that we were sometimes doing in a mundane fashion,
True.
monotonous fashion rather.